just a little bit of what we're gonna go through today is, as I discussed, we just want to go through a little bit about FSRA, not hugely in depth, but to the point of why, as a regulator, which sometimes sounds strange or misplaced, is trying to enable innovation and how it's part of our mandate. Really, why we think we could be an ideal partner for you and why try out one of the biggest tools we have, a test and learn, or is more commonly known as a regulatory sandbox. And then we'll be available for question and answers. With that being said, Scott is going to talk to you a little bit about FSRA and our innovation mandate in our office, the innovation office here.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. And so, like Charles alluded to, kind of a core message you're probably going to hear throughout this presentation today is that, at FSRA, we are committed to strong, sustainable, competitive, and innovative financial services in Ontario. We think about innovation in terms of responsible innovation, by which we mean supporting new ideas in our regulated sectors while balancing the needs and concerns and interests of consumers. So I'm going to take a few minutes to provide an overview of who we are at FSRA, our connection to innovation, and our approach to it. And then, like Charles said, he's going to do a deeper dive walkthrough on one of the primary tools that we use to support innovation right now. So if you go to the next slide, Charles, a little bit about who we are at FSRA. So we're an independent regulatory agency that oversees financial services and pensions in Ontario. Non-securities financial services, I should say. So securities is covered by another regulator. On the next slide, we'll get into more specifically the specific sectors that we regulate. But we're a relatively new regulator. We were launched in 2019 as sort of an amalgamation or a combination of two pre-existing regulators, the Financial Services Commission of Ontario and the Deposit Insurance Corporation of Ontario. And unlike some other regulators that you may have interacted with in the past, supporting innovation is a foundational part of our mandate as a regulator. So as you'll see on the slide there, under our Enabling Act, the FSRA Act is a statutory object around fostering strong, sustainable, competitive, and innovative financial services sectors. And so how do we kind of internalize that statutory object given that we're trying to balance this amongst our other ones as well. So we talk about ourselves as a progressive regulator in terms of, again, that idea of responsible innovation. So we are concerned with empowering businesses to, and supporting them to foster innovation while ensuring that proper consumer protection. We're also an innovation champion and driver. We have an innovation office that's been established that Charles and I are members of. And we do have a set of regulatory tools to support innovation, and those are enabled through the exemptive authority of our CEO and other discretionary powers at our disposal. And we're an outcomes-focused regulator, so we're principles-based. We take the approach of not being prescriptive around the process of meeting legislative and regulatory requirements. Rather, we ask regulated entities to show us how they intend to achieve the outcomes that we set out from a regulatory perspective in a safe manner for consumers. And so really the main message here is that, innovation, it's a foundational part of FSRA's mandate. We have invested in some tools to help us achieve that mandate. And we really want to encourage an open dialogue with innovators in Ontario to identify those opportunities and bring them to the forefront. So if we go to the next slide, as I alluded to earlier, so this slide really sets out kind of the scope of our authority when it comes to the different sectors that we have responsibility for regulating in Ontario. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but you can see there's quite a broad range of sectors within financial services that we cover. So various sectors within insurance, like property and casualty insurance, health. We also cover pensions, credit unions, mortgage brokers, so a whole range of sectors. And as I mentioned, that's sort of a historical combination of pre-existing regulators. And I should also mention that for some of these sectors, it also includes prudential supervision and market conduct functions. We go to the next slide. So I talked previously about how we kind of internalize that idea of innovation. And now I'll cover some of the steps we've been taking to support innovation, in a more practical sense. So from an organizational perspective, like I mentioned, we've established an innovation office to both promote innovative thinking in our regulated sectors and in FSRA, but also to work externally with innovators to help them develop and introduce new ideas into the market, while again, maintaining that consumer protection that's critical to our approach to responsible innovation. And at the Innovation Office, we are really big proponents of collaboration. We want to be always learning and engaging with new ideas that are out there, and managing, early any potential risks to avoid consumer harm down the road. In terms of the actions we've been taking to date, so we created an innovation framework, which shares our strategy and our guiding principles for how we want to be supporting and guiding innovation in Ontario. That exists on our website if you're curious to learn more. There is quite a lot of detail there, which I won't cover today. We've also established a regulatory sandbox, one of the primary tools that we have to support innovation today. We call it our test and learn environment, and it's really meant to encourage real-time experimentation while employing safeguards to try to avoid adverse impacts. And Charles is going to get into more detail on the mechanics of the TLE and to whom it may apply in just a moment. And then finally, we've been doing a lot of engagement, taking advantage of opportunities like these to try to build awareness of FSRA and our innovation mandate, and hear from innovators like yourselves about your ideas, opportunities that you see for innovation in financial services in the province, and any barriers you might be facing that we could help with. So Charles, if you go to the next slide. So given all of that, why should you come to us? Why should you want to work with us? So through our regulatory sandbox and some of our other tools like the discretionary powers that I alerted to earlier, we do provide a unique opportunity to test and refine your innovative ideas in a real world setting in Ontario. We do also understand that regulatory certainty is critical for innovators, and so we can help find you a clear path forward for approval, and reduce the risk and cost of non-compliance. We also do have access to in-house regulatory sector expertise within FSRA, and we can try to help connect you with the right sources of knowledge and advice you might be looking for from a regulatory perspective. And if it turns out that we're not the best partner to work with, we do have connections with other organizations in Ontario, both within the innovation ecosystem, also other regulators, both within the province and outside of the province. So if we aren't the right people to work with, we can definitely point you in the right direction. So with that, I'll pass it over to Charles.
Thanks, Scott. As Scott mentioned, right now I'm going to talk about perhaps the biggest tool in our toolbox to enable innovation to date. As Scott mentioned, we're only 4 years old, and this tool, known as the Test and Learn environment, more commonly known as the regulatory sandbox, is about a little over 2 years old. And we like to call it TLE for short. So if you hear me referencing it as TLE, that's short form for Test and Learn environment. But in essence, it's a staging ground where financial services companies can test new approaches, products, and services in a controlled and closely monitored environment to benefit both the company or entity and future regulations. And I'll get a little bit into that. So what we like to say here at FSRA is, which might seem different than most regulators, is we encourage experimentation. We ask people to come to us, push the boundaries, and we'll put on the guardrails to make sure that we mitigate risk. It's safe for consumers. It's safe both from a market conduct and prudential side, but we are actually encouraging those conversations and those ideas to for experimentation. So how do we do that in the Test and Learn? Well, we really want you to come to us and with any ideas, but what it is, it's a safe space for testing. If there's something in the legislation or regulation or under our authority we can give a time-limited exemption for to test your product and prove it is the best for the public and safe. We have that ability in the test and learn. It's also a staging ground for testing a product. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a monitored, time-limited test period. What that means by monitored is we're more so exchanging information for how the test works, and we can actually course correct or make adjustments to it accordingly to make sure that anything that was not foreseen, we adjust accordingly and improve it. And that also kind of fits in the next point is the real-time review through data and information that's shared from both entities so that we can adjust that accordingly. But at the end goal is that it both validates the product, it's safe, you don't have to worry about any regulatory stuff in the future, and it makes sure it's safe, and also it makes sure that we can adjust regulations accordingly to make sure that it's modern. For innovators, we like to say the test and learn helps reduce the risk of financial penalties, non-compliance, litigation, damages to their reputation. And really for the industry as a whole, financial services, our test and learns try to ensure Ontarians continue to build and modernize, and or at least the financial services do, and innovate the financial services sector. How experimenting might help, how the TLE might help. As I mentioned, it's a low risk environment that we work on testing a testing plan together. It's really a collaborative process. It's not as if, as Scott mentioned, that we're prescriptive. We say that this is how you have to do the test. This is what we want to submit. It's really basically starts off with what do you think is the best way to test this? And we come up with a testing plan accordingly. And we have a data science lab team in-house that looks at the data information and says and looks at it and says that it could be tweaked this way, or it could be made better that way, or maybe we can use this information. It's an opportunity to identify early flaws in anything that gets tested. And as I mentioned, there's an open and clear dialogue between us and the entity that's testing. As Scott mentioned, there's reduced costs associated with having clarity and navigating the regulatory landscape, and it's seen as a low-cost route to the market for that reason. So how does the test and learn work? As I mentioned, it's conversations back and forth, but there's essentially, when you boil it down to, there's four aspects which we highlighted here. And we actually have more information and questions that you could look at on our website for how the TLE works. But essentially, what is needed is a market-ready product, service, technology, and business model. So if you have that, you'd already qualify on the first stage. Second, we need to see a clearly defined objective on how your innovation would benefit both the sector, Ontario as a whole, and consumers. Fourth, the regulation you would like to test it against. What is the barrier that is in the way, and how you propose to get around that barrier? A way to get around that barrier would likely be the product and how it's set up in the testing plan. But those are the four aspects. And then once that's set up, we set up a testing plan for a time period to see if it's meeting its hypothesis, it's safe for consumers, and then we could possibly grant exemption for that regulation permanently after the testing period. Our first successful test and learn happened about a year and a half ago. Something from insurance companies called the direct access model. Essentially, what it was a novel way to distribute insurance products that both save the consumer money and also save time, and was a better experience and also more tailored to the consumer needs. And I won't get into too much detail of what the actual test is and the actual product, but what I want to emphasize with this slide is that this literally started all with informal conversations like me and Scott are encouraging everyone to come to us to discuss. It was an organization coming to us saying that we have this idea for how we can distribute insurance products, but currently it's not allowed in the regulation. But if we can show a safe way to do it, would you consider it? And since we had that under our discretion, our authority, we said that if we come up with a safe testing plan and we try it in the test and learn environment, our CEO will likely exercise his discretion. And that's what we're doing right now. We're in a test period with this direct access model. So far, it's looking good, but the drive home right here is that it all started with a conversation. Uh, I just want to leave you with next steps. Really, it's to reach out to us. I encourage everyone, here's our email address if you want them, but I encourage everyone, if they can possible, book office hours. We still have some available next week. I understand, so we can have a more wholesome back and forth conversation because we find those are the types where we can actually get into an issue and discuss back and forth how we can possibly help. Uh, Obviously, I presented on the test and learn is not the only tool in our toolbox, and I'll just point people some other ones they can look at our website. But really, as Scott mentioned, we're trying to collaboratively work through enabling innovation. So if it's not through the test and learn, we want to hear barriers, opportunities, ideas. And then if we're not the right partner, we would be happy to try and find you the right partner and provide any regulatory certainty or clarity that we can.